Are you ready to turn your potential into performance? If so, you're in the right place. This is the Coach Bru Show, and here's your host, John Brubaker.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Coach Bru Show, podcast episode number 517. Can you believe we've done 517 episodes of this show? Unreal. Where does the time go? I tell you. Well, today's podcast is brought to you by our friends at Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Coach Bru. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Coach Bru. And that's for those spelling challenged, that's Coach B-R-U. So each week, every episode of the Coach Bru podcast, we bring you strategies, ideas, and insights to turn your potential into performance, to help get you from where you are to where you want to be, wherever that is, in whatever your industry. And today's episode features a very special guest. I was looking back on all the guests that I've had, both on the podcast and on my radio show I hosted in Boston on NBC Sports for a number of years. It was the Coach Bru Show. It was a business talk show on a sports station Sunday evenings. And just kind of looking back on all the different guests and even back to my time on air with ESPN Radio and Fox Sports when I was a sports talk show host. Today's guest on the podcast is probably, definitely the most interesting, fascinating person I've had the pleasure of interviewing. And his journey, I think, we're all going to hear ourselves a little bit in his story. And the reason I wanted to bring him on is this is a guy who absolutely walked away from a very, very successful career to blaze his own trail as an entrepreneur. He bet on himself. He did it without any kind of safety net. It wasn't a side hustle. He went all in right away. And I know there's a lesson in there for everyone listening to this episode. His name is Chad Prather. And Chad is, I believe, the funniest human being on the planet. And he is a humorist. He hesitates to call himself a comedian. He is more of a humorist. It's a slice of life, American, everything about this country that's over the top, ridiculous, absurd, and just plain funny is his kind of domain that he operates in. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Chad in Boston earlier this week. And we interviewed each other for our podcasts, which you're about to hear me play my interview with Chad. And I got to see him in action at Laugh Boston Comedy Club right in Boston. And it was just, I think he was in rare form that night, but just absolutely transcendent message when it comes to how what you're doing relates to performance. I think you've heard me say this on the podcast, and if you've read anything I've written, you've heard me say this. We're all performers and entertainers. We really are, whether you think you are or you're not. Trust me, you really are. Our stages just all look a little different. He operates, on the stage in theaters, amphitheaters, stadiums, and in this case in Boston, the stage of a comedy club. You may operate on stage that is a corporate office. You may be a speaker and author listening to this, and your stage is, at a book signing or, the book itself. You might be working in sales, and your stage is whatever office you walk into, whatever meeting room you're in. You're a performer. And in this country, more than anywhere else, we're expected to entertain. We Americans place a high value on amusement and entertainment. I call it E to E ratio. Your E to E ratio, what is it? That's your education to entertainment ratio. And I believe that one of the reasons why Chad's message is so transcendent is because in order to capture our attention, much less maintain our attention in this country, we need you to entertain us. We need to be amused and entertained first before we are ready and willing to be educated or informed. And I liken it to, I like to call it hiding the medicine in the candy. And if you've ever, if you have a dog, for example, and you've ever had to feed medication, a pill to your dog, they're not going to just take the medication in and of itself when you hand it to them. They're going to spit that out. You wrap it in a piece of bologna or ham or, slather some peanut butter all over it, and they will happily consume all of that and ask for more. So I use that as a metaphor for the message that we need to deliver. And, absolutely, in the message Chad delivers night after night across the country and all these venues that he performs at. He's on tour right now. You should check out his tour schedule. He's coming to a city near you. You go to watchchad.com. His schedule's right there. Don't just pick up a ticket. Pick up a bunch of tickets and bring your friends. Thank me later because they'll be thanking you. So go to watchchad.com and find him, connect with him. We connected on Twitter, and we'll share a little bit more about that when the interview runs here in just a second. But I really do believe that his message transcends entertainment, and can't wait to hear your thoughts and feedback on the episode. Feel free to leave a comment on the podcast page. And here is my interview from Laugh Boston with Chad Prather. Welcome to the Coach Bru podcast. We are joined today by a very special guest, a household name if you, have a sense of humor. And his name is Chad Prather. You can check him out at watchchad.com. Chad is a humorist. What would you call yourself, Chad?
Yeah, I go with that. I like the term humorist. I think it's one of those terms that's been lost. I think that everybody, we throw out the terms comedian and comic, but everybody that's in that world, they know the difference. And I almost hesitate to ever call myself a comedian because I think because I admire those guys who do that so much,
And it's observational, and it's just, like slice of life, like what's funny and what's wrong with like what we do is ridiculous, over the top Americans, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the things back when I started doing social media videos and creating content for social media. I was trying to look at things that everybody deals with, things everybody sees. Everybody has seen somebody walking with their pants sagging, or people that don't use their blinkers in their car, or, the person who, the crazy parents at the Little League field. And so I started just looking at these things and saying, what's something everybody universally has witnessed in their life? And those were the things that resonated with people.
When you said pants sagging, I just got like flashbacks to Walmart. Thank you. You mentioned like social media and how you've put out a lot of this content. And that's actually how we connected. We connected on Twitter. I have a couple mutual friends, the entertainment and music world. I'd love to kind of backtrack a little bit. I find your story fascinating on a number of levels as an entrepreneur, as a performer. And I think we're all in some way, shape, or form performers. Our stage just looks a little different. So just kind of take us back to how you made the shift from your previous profession to blazing your own trail and kind of betting on yourself and what that looked like initially.
Well, for me, I always felt like there was a way to use my voice to build a platform and make a living using your voice. So when I was 19 years old and still in college, I had this idea that I wanted to speak to people. And so I started working on how do you communicate? How do you give a speech? How do you teach a principle? How do you do these? And so I did everything I could, read everything I could, and then I'd go to places like churches, and I'd go to nonprofit organizations. I traveled all around the world. I'd go to these. I'd go visit missionaries in Africa and Southeast Asia and Central America, and I'd go spend time with them and go up into these villages and speak through translators in places like Moscow, Russia, you know. And so all of these things, I would just look for every opportunity. I like to tell people that anybody that I could get to stand still or walk slow, I would try to speak to them, you know, talk to them and work on how, you know, you communicate. And so I wound up being in that world of motivational speaking, inspirational speaking. I got known as the guy who would make people laugh. And so they would, you know, the bio on whatever thing was always about. I was like, gosh, I hope I'm funny, because people brought me in here to, you know, and I wasn't really trying to be funny. It just kind of came out. And so, then I kind of went through a little bit of a burnout in life and was just really kind of disenchanted and disengaged with things. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go. And this was in my early 30s. I said, I'm going to go be like the rest of the world. I'm tired of working so hard. I'm just going to go get a job. Yeah. And I wound up going into the world of sales and sales training with a Fortune 300 company. It was a great job. And that was the only 4 or 5 years of my life that I ever had a boss. And I was miserable. I hated it because, in truth, I am an entrepreneur. I am a hustler. I am always out there going after it. And so finally one day I called my wife on the phone and I said, I'm done with this. I'm depressed. I'm miserable. This job has a big part of it. I got to quit. And so I wound up doing that. And I always knew that there was a way to take, say, social media and use it, you know, because social media was this big thing. It had become this big thing. I was like, there's a way to go back into the world of speaking and communicating using social media. And so, again, I would just be bored in my truck sitting in traffic, and I'd pop the camera phone up on the dashboard, start talking to it for 2 or 3 minutes, and I'd post it out there on social media for the world to see and the world to judge. And the next thing you know, the thing goes viral. I can remember my mother calling me on the phone. She said, "Are you sick?" And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I was at church on Sunday morning and somebody walked up and said, 'Have you heard about Chad?'" She said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "He's gone viral." And so, you know, she was like, what's going on? And I was like, "Don't worry about it, Mom. They're just talking about my Facebook and my Twitter." And I had no idea what that sounded like in her head. And so, you know, she was like, "Chad, you're 43. You're way too old to be touching your Twitter." But it was funny because, you know, this stuff goes viral, and it's like overnight, all of a sudden, everybody's going, "Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy?" And so one thing led to another. We started putting out, you know, I started putting out more of these videos just to see if people would watch them. And over the last, going on 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years, you know, we've crossed over 1 billion views on Facebook, and you know, it's just crazy numbers that are out there. You know, we started a new Watch Chad Prather Facebook page, which grew to over 1 million in the last 6 weeks. Mostly new audience in a big way. 90 million views in those 6 weeks on videos. So it's just crazy how it took a weird path. And I used to feel like, it's funny, Bru, because I used to feel like that God had told me back in the day, like, one day you'll speak to thousands of people. I had no idea, though, I'd be sitting alone in my truck when I did it. And it's amazing because, you know, we put these things out here, and you have 500,000 people who watch these videos. It's absolutely insane.
Well, what's fascinating to me is, you know, the whole myth of overnight success. Yeah. And, you know, I hear people all the time say, if I could just get a video to go viral, or they're trying to get a video to go viral, or, you know, any kind of message, a blog post, whatever it is, content. Mm-hmm. And my response is always, viral is not a business model. Right. Viral is not viable. It's just something that happens. You can't manufacture viral. Yeah. Like, you can manufacture a virus in a petri dish. Yeah. That's about it. But, you know, unless you have, you know, a body of work behind something that then goes viral, it's not going to result in anything anyway. So, you know, talk to us a little bit about everything that sort of happened, you know, behind the scenes before that first, air quotes, viral video. Yeah. Well, first of all, I always knew that it could happen. And interestingly enough, when I quit that job, I was kind of down and out. And when I say quit the job in the corporate world, I stepped out literally into nothing. Not like I had some huge savings account that I could live off of. I said, okay, I'm literally going back to the world of hustling. I'm going to hustle. And so I would always look at this social media thing. I'm staring at my phone. I'm looking at it. I'm like, there's a way to make a living doing this. And so in my head, I started formulating a business plan. Mm-hmm. Because on the heels of that, I had this fledgling network, Ride TV, offer me a television show, a travel television show. And so that
that was great. It kind of helped me pay the bills through that. And I'm doing TV. And I can remember the network president who walked into a meeting with all of the talent, so to speak, in a conference room one day, and he said, "You know what we need? We need a viral video." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure. We need to win the lottery too. I mean, if we could predict all of this stuff, sure. Of course we need a viral video." A week later, I had a viral video, and it just happened. It was like knowing where lightning was going to strike, and it happened. But I had started strategically growing social media in a way to ultimately build a business out of it. Because it's one thing to go viral once. It's another thing to go viral every single week for 3 years. I started building strategies around it because, let's face it, viral doesn't pay the bills. Facebook doesn't give you a penny, and so you're doing all of this stuff, and people look at it and say, "Oh, he's a YouTube guy, makes his money off of YouTube." I really don't, because I'm really not a YouTube guy. I'm not very big on YouTube, in contrary to what people think. But it was interesting because I look at these people who went out and maybe they did go viral and they've never been able to build a business off of it, or they've never been able to capitalize off of it. For me, I've been able to go out because of the preparation that I made. I've built about 10 businesses out of this thing, and so when you count them all up, it's amazing. Because in 2015, I'm doing these videos. They're going viral, and I'm like, still no money from it. A lot of exposure, great therapy, but there was no real money coming from it. So it was that preparation to build slowly. Because a lot of people think you're just going to boom, all of a sudden, overnight success. Even with the viral nature of the stuff that I've done, the exposure and the popularity of it, I made sure that it went slow. Went slow. So here's the way I describe it to people, and I knew this back in 2015 because I almost saw it as a vision, this business plan as a vision. 2015 was going to be a baby in a birth canal. You didn't know what you were having, and you didn't know what was coming. But then all of a sudden you give birth to it, and it's this weird, grotesque, misshapen, odd, purple, gooey thing that you love, but you just don't really know. You don't really know the identity of this thing as of yet. And then for me, 2016 was going to be all of a sudden this baby taking shape and starting to look like something, and maybe rolls over, maybe sits up, maybe can crawl a little bit. By 2017, I felt like the baby was going to be walking, maybe stumbling and running a little bit, and then by 2018, take off, really going somewhere. And you know what? That has happened almost on cue, 100% to a T. It's amazing. And so now the sky's the limit. I have no idea where this baby's going to head.
This baby.
I love this baby.
And the fascinating thing with that is it all does start with a vision, whatever it is for anyone, any of us. I think it's interesting that, so often you hear people so the example I give with virality is, not virility, virality.
It's a hard one to say.
It's a lot like the artist who just happens to have the one-hit wonder, and their single goes, quote, viral, but there's nothing there. There's no organic fan base there to back it up, and exposure. You can't take exposure to the bank and say, I'd like to pay my mortgage with this exposure or feed my family with this exposure. It's that methodical building and having different kind of structures, if you will, around that. So you'd mentioned kind of building out several different companies, and so the kind of the foundation around this high rise that is now Chad Prather. What were some of those different foundations?
Well, it was interesting for me because I was when I say stepped into nothing, I can't stress that enough. Broke is a joke. I mean, it was like selling things off in order to make ends meet. Here's a gun that belonged to, you're selling it at the pawn shop, trying to do all of these things because I risked it all for me, but I always had that inner faith, that ability to depend on God, on myself, on those around me, the people that I networked with, to build something. And I was like, this is a season. I always look at things and say, we all go through these seasons. And I equate it to the seasons of the year. You got, spring, summer, winter, and what did I leave out? Fall. And so, you look at the summertime. Or let's start over. If you look at the wintertime is that that hard time. It's cold. It's nothing seems to grow. Everything's frozen. Then you go into a springtime where all of a sudden the blooms start to come, and you're like, oh, that's I call it the hallelujah time, because everything's looking good and all that. But then the blooms fall off because the summertime comes, and those are the hot times. And then everybody's like, man, well, I thought I was succeeding, but now everything's melting away. But then you got to go through that hard time, that hot time, in order to get to the harvest time, which is the fall, when everything starts to come in. And you're like, I look at that and I'm like, it's just a season. It's just a season. So I built a foundation of knowing that regardless of what was coming my way, I could do it. My wife used to look at me and roll her eyes, and she was like, Chad, I don't think you'll ever be satisfied. I don't think you'll ever get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm content. I'm happy where I am. She looks at me now. That used to be a negative thing. She looks at me now and she says, I can see where that was positive for you, because that ability to be discontent led you to more and more things. And I encourage people all the time. It's like a child that's hyperactive. I'd much rather see a kid that's climbing the walls than a kid who's sitting in the corner eating glue, not talking to anybody. Because I can take that kid with the activity and shape him and help him create something, be something. It's hard to do something with somebody that's comatose. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so for me, that hyperactivity, if you will, I think it was an underlying foundation that said, you know what, I'm just not content where I am. I'm going to keep going.
Well, I view everything through kind of the lens of the stadium. And everything you just described with that, your wife saying, I don't think I'll ever be content. Well, that discontent drives you. And I look at it just like coaches. Like, you are relieved when you win, and you hate losing more than you love winning. Like, there's a sense of relief when you've won the game, and then it becomes immediately what's next. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where that kind of creative discontent, or whatever you want to call that, stems from with most high achievers. Yeah. And there's, success leaves clues. Like, if you're not discontent and you're constantly looking for more, you need to constantly be looking for more to get to that next level. Let's backtrack for a minute and talk about the selling things. Mm-hmm. To pay the bills, and the early days of going out on your own. I remember one thing your wife Jade said to you when you said you quit your job and you're gonna start your own business. And she said, doing what? And you said, being me. And then her response was,
I said, I'm gonna make a living just being myself. She said, what's the street value on your personality? And at the time I made a snarky comment. I said, well, it's about as much as President Obama giving a keynote speech at the NRA convention. And she said, well, that's worth. And I said, well, there you go. That's my point. And it was worthless. But I said, here's the thing, because again, I've always been a hustler. So I said, look, I'll find ways to, quote, make money. But what I'm trying to build is not, a cash flow. I'm trying to build a life here. And money is just a part of that life. And so I said, well, everything that I own, it's not nailed down. I can sell it. And, I had, and I told you the story about the big green egg. I had that barbecue grill, and I loved that big green egg because I love to barbecue. I love to grill, and that thing was like a prized possession for me, and they're expensive grills. I mean, they're overpriced, great, nothing against the big green egg guys. They've built a great marketing deal, and they've capitalized on it. But I love that egg, and so I got to a point where it was like, I got to sell this thing. Because I was looking around, I was like, what do I have of value that I can just make it another week? Yeah. Because the break is coming. The break is coming. And so I can remember the day I put that thing on Craigslist. It sold almost immediately. My good friend Allison Stonecipher, who's like the sister I never had, she was there with me the day I, with tears in my eyes, loaded that thing into the back of this guy's Jeep Wrangler, and he drives off with my big green egg. So to this day, whenever we're talking about new deals and new opportunities and new things that are coming, new businesses, new partnerships, new shows, all these things, we'll text message each other, and we'll always finish it with hashtag big green egg.
I did not realize that was Allison.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Allison is my closest, nearest, dearest friend on the planet. And no offense to other friends, but I promise you, she's been there. She's been there with me in the doldrums of life, and I love her with my own life. And I tell you, Allison's tremendous. I performed their wedding ceremony when she and her husband Brian got married last year, and so it's funny. And she's always been a constant encouragement. But no matter how much I complain, No matter what, if I want to gripe about being in an airport, another airplane, another city, another hotel, another, whatever, another meet and greet, another handshake, all of these requirements and, all these things, she just will remind me. She said, well, you could go back to selling big green eggs. Yeah. So quit complaining. And so for me, it's kind of that punch in the junk that reminds you, that reality check, that little tap that says, hey, buddy, you're not where you once were. Quit complaining. And so, yeah, I was at a point where I was running out of stuff to sell, quite honestly. but you know how many people can relate to that? You do what you have to do to support your family and all these things. And that was just my story, because I said, you know what? I got a dream. I got a vision. I wanted to see beyond the four walls that were enclosing my life and see beyond those boundaries and horizons. And I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it. I'm still doing that. I do that every day. I'm not where I want to be. I'm content in that I've learned to sit down on the inside. But there's always more to achieve. There's always more to do. I mean, you look at it from the stadium perspective. I do too, because I'll go out and do these shows that might have 100 people at the show. I might go out and have 2,000 people at the show. I have to go out and be 100% my best, no matter how many people are in the room. Yes, I'd rather do 2,000 people, but how valuable is it with those 100 people in the room? Because you can work on yourself and do these things. I think that's true in life as well. You have to look at the goal, at the big picture, but you have to kind of work backwards from it and say, what is it that made me ready for being on these big stages? It had to be those places where I'm in Little Gombe, Nigeria, in 1996, speaking to a crowd of Nigerians that've gathered together under the lamp of a generator, and I'm like, it makes what I do now worthwhile.
What year was this?
That was 96. Yeah, 96.
Was that pre-email?
That was pre-email. Yeah.
So you might have spoken to the Nigerian prince who was trying to smuggle his inheritance
changed his life
to me in the United States.
I gave him a business plan. I gave that Nigerian prince a business plan. Forward thinking. God bless.
So we can blame you. That's perfect. So I think everyone has had one of those kind of big green egg moments, or several of them, and that's sort of the point where you say, I'm going all in. I'm betting on myself. And was it Cortez when they stormed they arrived on the coast of wherever in South America, and they burned the boats? Yeah, it was Cortez.
No going back.
Yeah.
My good friend Gary Chapman, who's a singer-songwriter in Nashville, he's got a phrase that I stole a while back. He said, I've hit rock bottom enough times that if you ever get down there too, you'll see my name scratched on the wall at least 3 or 4 times. And I've been down there. I've seen Gary's name on the wall. So it's one of those places where I don't think you're ever really useful until you've been broken. And I went through a breaking experience about 4 years ago that just through all of that stuff. And I'll tell you, while I'm selling everything off, I was so miserable. My wife looked at me one day and she said, Chad, you can leave or I can leave. She hates when I tell this story, but it's the truth. She said, you can leave or I can leave, but I'm not living with this person because I didn't marry this guy. You said you wanted to go out and be yourself. Well, this version of yourself ain't sellable. That ain't marketable. She said, and I'm not going to live with him. And I'll tell you what, through the episode that we went through and all of that, it was so eye-opening and so breaking for me, because I realized, and I'll tell you another thing that happened right on the heel, before all of this began for me. Another thing that opened my eyes was when Robin Williams killed himself. So Robin Williams kills himself, and I'm sitting there going, and it impacted me because I was like, here's a guy who's on top of the world. He's funny, and he influenced me, and he's successful. He's one of the best at his craft, and just a genius of a person. Had it all by the world standards, but so miserably took his own life.
Yeah, how's that guy not happy?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. And so that was the day. That was the day where I sat in a parking lot at the gym. I wasn't in the gym. I was at the gym. There's a huge difference. And I was sitting at the gym, and I called my wife on the phone, and that's when we had that conversation. I said, I'm done. I'm going to quit my job. She said, I support that. And I said, good, because I've already quit. And so I just said, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going out, with a noose around my neck, physically or metaphorically. I'm not going to go out and do that because I'm so miserable by being somebody else's puppet. I'm going to go be myself.
And I think life's too short. for any of us to be doing something that we're miserable with, what would be one piece of advice you'd give other people who, are looking at you as the example? And I think we're all either a great example or a cautionary tale with whatever we're doing. People are looking at you as the great example of betting on yourself, taking that plunge, going all in. But again, it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a viral video that all of a sudden turned into, millions of dollars.
Right.
What's your best advice for someone else looking to do the same thing? Kind of the methodical approach.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about it before we started recording, and I say it, and sometimes it sounds a little bit trite and it sounds a little bit cliche-ish, but you have got to be yourself. You got to be authentic. You got to be genuine. You got to find your identity. I think the most liberating thing that a human being can do, especially a man, and there's such an attack on masculinity and manhood these days, and men are almost afraid to be themselves. You got to find your identity. Don't try to be a copycat. They describe John the Baptist as as one who cried out, a voice that cried out in the wilderness. And it's interesting. He was a voice. He wasn't an echo. He wasn't saying what others said. He was his own voice. And I look at examples and I say, these people who really made it, they found a way to make themselves real and ultimately made themselves marketable, because out of identity comes destiny. You can't have a future that's significant unless you have an identity that's genuine. And if you're going to have identity that leads to destiny, you can't leave. You're going to leave a legacy. You can't leave a legacy without the first two. So find out who you are, figure it out, and then don't apologize for it. Yeah. Be yourself.
So, and you have to go through some hardship along the way to find that, and it's that self-discovery. I think the key to performance enhancement is self-awareness. We're never going to outperform our own self-worth. Mm-hmm. So, you talked about authenticity. I think it's no small coincidence that one of the first big, it might have been the first, but one of the first big videos that kind of put you on my radar screen was called Unapologetically Southern. Yeah. And I don't look at you and think of you as, well, that's Chad. He's unapologetically Southern because you're from Texas, and Texas isn't the South. Nope. It's Texas. But you're unapologetically yourself. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that? Why you think that resonated, not just with me, but that resonated with the masses? And then kind of when you knew there's some traction taking place.
Yeah, that video originated, it was an off-the-cuff. Most of the videos were off-the-cuff back in those days, especially. I put no thought into them whatsoever. It was just, boom, here it comes. But I'd gotten a message, and somebody had said, we don't want to listen to you. We don't like you because we can tell you're from the South. We can hear your accent. We know everybody from the South is ignorant. And I grew up in the state of Georgia, so, I haven't lost my Southern accent. I've muted it. In the world of communication, I've tried to bring it down a little bit, because when I get back around my people in Georgia, it comes out and it's horrible. We slaughter the English language. But for me, it was I can't apologize for being what I am. I mean, this is who I am. We talk with a Southern accent, and I use this as an example in the video. We speak with a Southern accent because that's the only thing we ever knew. What do you want us to do? And I get around you guys, y'all live in Maine, and I'm like, what language are they talking about? I did a show in Ridgefield, Connecticut a couple of months back, and I was sitting there, I was slinging out these words like y'all and fixin' to and gonna, and I even said something about being naked, and I was like, do y'all even understand anything I'm saying right now? So it was a lot of fun, but we make jokes about it, but it was I'm not going to apologize for who I am. And here's the funny thing. I used to have people, and I still do, people always say, you say what we want to say and we can't say it. And I used to say, why can't you say it? And then it hit me one day. I was like, they can't say it because they have bosses and they have jobs and they have to answer to people. There's social media policies, and you got to be careful with all these things you say, because the thought police and the word police are out there. And I said, thank God I made the decision back then that I was going to be my own guy. Yeah. And not have to answer to anybody. Yeah, there's consequences, of course, but, and I've tried to be careful with how I say things and what I say. But, I love the fact that I created this platform where I could go out and be my own person. And, you have to do it, and you can't apologize for it.
How did you know you were getting traction with it? At what point? Because I think, you look at, in order to win, you have to know what loses you games. And I think like success always leaves clues, so does failure. So how did you know, like what were the first early clues, like this is resonating, I can tell that, you know, me being unapologetically myself is like I'm saying the things other people are thinking. What was kind of the first aha moment with that?
Well, I always, again, I looked at Facebook. I used to put out these, I'd put out one-liners and jokes and things like that. I always saw it as a medium to just make people laugh or smile. And then when I started doing videos, they were so crude and so raw. I would do this little series of videos called Chad's Church, which was a silly, just because it was nice phonetically, it sounded great. And I'd try to do these inspirational deals in 60 seconds. And so people were watching that, and then I'd put out some funny videos. I had a friend of mine named Trey Chapman who's in Fort Worth, Texas, and he has a pretty good social media following. He's a food critic and runs a food blog, and we'd go back and forth with each other, and everybody kept going, you guys need like a reality show where they follow you around. So he and I every day would trade barbs on social media, and then I just started saying, well, I'm just going to put it out there to the general masses. And at that time I was doing that television show that nobody was watching. Man, I had a production assistant who said, why don't you start making those videos, putting them out there and make money off of them? And I said, how do you do it? She said, put it on YouTube. She said, monetize them. So I started researching a little bit. Anyway, long story shorter, I put a couple of videos out that all of a sudden like 10,000 people watched. And I was like, holy crap, 10,000 people are watching this. That's a lot of people. And then all of a sudden I do it, and then 40,000 people. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I did a video that I think to date was one of the funniest ones I ever did. And really, it's only been seen like 800,000 times. I thought it should have gone viral, but it just never got traction. And early on, I think like 50,000 people watching. It was about the kids are late for school because I had overslept and I took them to school. And that to me was funny because it was a very true story. It all happened exactly the way it went down. And it was funny because all of a sudden the haters came out on that one. Yeah. You're not a good parent. I can't believe, who is this guy? He's a joke. What's he wearing? And, the nitpicky stuff.
Well, those people obviously never had kids because we've all been there, and that's why the video was so funny. We've all been that guy that had to take the kids to school.
I literally gave them Oreos and Diet Pepsi for breakfast. I mean, I was like, get in the truck. We're late because my wife had gone to work at the hospital. She's a nurse, and I knew it was like, because she's such a stickler for things like that, and I am too. But anyway, so we did that video, and then I was like, dang, people are really watching this stuff. And then a week later, I had one that went to 1 million views in a day, and so then it was like, oh God, we're off to the races with this thing. It got huge really, really fast. So I don't know that it's sunk in yet, these numbers that I deal with on a regular basis. I toss around big numbers, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, all of these different things. I don't think even I realize how big those deals are. I'll tell you, I can do shows in Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles. I can go to New York, New Jersey. I'm up here in Boston. The fact that anyone buys a ticket to a live show, that right there is evidence that these things have worked for me, and just the sheer numbers of it has been incredible. I just went out and did two nights in San Diego, right downtown San Diego, and 2 full houses both nights, and I'm like, wow, the power of this thing that we built is absolutely incredible. It's unreal.
Did you go to Slater's 50/50 Burger while you're out in San Diego?
I didn't. I have before, though. I didn't on Slater. I love San Diego. That's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful city. It's a great food city. Slater's is my favorite place, though, because I think your food should come with a side of angioplasty. But I get the peanut butter, jelly, bacon double cheeseburger, a la mode. Yeah. And it's awesome. Just the kind of the optics of it and the excess. Funny. It just sums up America and one dish.
We do. I'll do about 85 or 90 live shows, tour shows every year, and then on top of that, I'm doing a lot of different live events that we do. And of course, we're working. This is what's funny, and I told you guys before we started recording. Now we're working on a sitcom out in Hollywood, which was some of the biggest people, writers, and producers in that town, all based on this guy who just reflects on life, and we're probably gonna, if the thing goes out, the hook on the show is the last 30 seconds is this guy, I climb in the truck with the dog in the back seat and give my moral of the story kind of thing. So it's like, how far, the fact that the top producers in Hollywood are wanting to make this show, how far this guy with a cowboy hat on, sitting in the bed of in the cab of his truck, pontificating on life, Look how far that's gone. That's mind-blowing. I mean, and that's crazy that, I mean, you know, we're now with Lionsgate. Lionsgate wants to make this thing into a sitcom. I mean, this is like, dang, it's like putting Albert Pujols on your church softball team. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts where this thing has gone. It's crazy. So, yeah, I that's why I say all the time, I'm not sure it's sunk in yet.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is super important for anyone, you know, in business, entrepreneurship, anything, one of the things, two things actually. I was never very good at math. I was so
Neither
quote
Bernie Sanders.
Well, no. I was so good at math, I took geometry 3 times in high school. Timing and entry point, I think, are the two of the most critical things. Talent matters, absolutely. Timing and entry point are huge. Why do you feel that the timing right now is so right for what you're doing and kind of this next chapter of the book that is Chad, which is now network TV?
Everything has been timing. You go back to when the videos went viral on social media. I was studying what was going on with the trends, and I knew that Mark Zuckerberg wanted Facebook to be the next YouTube, so he was putting heavy emphasis on videos. That's when I transitioned from just writing out jokes to telling the jokes on video, and the videos went crazy because that's what he wanted. Our new watch page, the Watch Chad Prather page on Facebook, that's the new thing. So we went to that, and all the way to now with television. You know, my head writer with this sitcom, he said this show should have been made 2 years ago, but Hollywood wasn't ready for it. They leaned so far in a direction politically that was so away from my voice. But now they're kind of coming back in some ways. Some are. The tides are. So I think you have to study the trends. I think you have to pay attention. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do in life? Now, where's the jumping off point? And you really have to target that. And see, for instance, you take Facebook right now. Facebook is at a point, because they've been under so much scrutiny, Facebook will tell you what type of content they want to see posted and what they'll loosen the reins on the algorithms. If you'll study those things, there's no reason why, whether you're trying to market your business or boost sales or drive people to a website or anything these days, if you pay attention to what Facebook's telling you, they're telling you how to do it. But a lot of people, they don't want to pay attention to that. And ultimately, people say, well, you know, timing is not luck, is the point I'm trying to take.
Yeah.
You got it. Where you jump in, the entry point and your timing, it's not luck. It really is. I'll put it this way. It takes a lot of practice to be spontaneous. It takes a lot of practice to look spontaneous, because people look at it and they're like, oh, wow, it's just kind of off the cuff. This stuff rattles off. No, these days when I put videos out, I realize how many millions of people are going to be looking at these things. One wrong move, one foot in the mouth, and you can ruin a lot of stuff. And so now I've started thinking, you need to probably put some thought into this deal. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work.
So I love that timing is not luck, because people love to chalk it up to that, because on the surface it might look that way.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to study and know the numbers. And at the same time, like with Facebook, you have to understand it's a rented platform. You don't own it. Your audience there could be taken away from you at any moment. And that's why you need to be, omnipresent, or at least give the appearance of it by being, in other areas as well. So what I want to do now is a little lightning round to wrap things up, Chad.
All right.
Where I'm just going to ask you a couple quick questions, and some of this is based on some of your what I would call Chad's greatest hits. Okay, so this is would you rather? 3 questions. Would you rather wear a men's romper, which I know is an oxymoron, or eat a Tide Pod?
I'd rather wear the romper. I think the Tide Pod is toxic, so I'm going to go with who eats Tide? I mean, really, like they really have to put warnings on the Tide Pods now. Isn't that crazy that they have to tell people don't eat these things? I mean, this detergent. I saw a Tide Pod commercial on TV the other day, and they were like, not for human consumption. I was like, are you kidding me? With this, you got to tell people not to eat soap? So I would wear the romper. I would hope nobody would see me, because it would be the end. But you know what? Now they're coming out with like these patriotic rompers, and I'm like, yay. I'm gonna wear the American flag.
What prompted that, besides that question being an homage to my two favorite of your videos, was we went out on this like 4th of July fireworks cruise in Portland Harbor.
Yeah.
And there was a family on the cruise. And this is how you know everyone wants to be American, even if they won't admit it, but they can't all be American. It's a French-Canadian family, and the husband and wife were wearing matching like Stars and Stripes tops, or so I thought. He was actually, and he's like 6'4", probably 265, big dude. Mm-hmm. He was actually wearing a Stars and Stripes men's romper. Yet it was very apparent when he opened his mouth, this person is French Canadian. Yeah. So I would go with the romper too. Next question: if you had to give one of these two things up, would it be sweet tea or barbecue?
I'd give up sweet tea. I don't. I'd happily do that. A man's got to eat his meat. You know what I'm saying? That sounds weird, but yeah, 100%. You got to eat the meat. And I'm from Texas. I claim Texas, at least at this point. I find myself somewhat of the barbecue connoisseur. I told you the big green egg story. This is like a religion. So I grew up in Georgia eating the Georgia Carolina pork barbecue. I never had any knowledge of this thing called beef brisket or beef ribs. We didn't do that kind of stuff in Georgia. And you come out there, and all of a sudden you realize in Texas especially, this is religion.
I hear beef brisket on a donut is a delicacy.
I've heard that too, and I want to try one of these donut hamburgers. Have you ever done that? Like, that's a thing now. People are weird, you know it, but that actually sounds somewhat appetizing to me. I want to try that. I got to find a place that makes them.
Best barbecue in Texas.
Billy Oaks Acres Barbecue. My buddy Billy Woodrich, he's got a barbecue place there in Fort Worth. He has a pit that was built back in the 50s, and the thing is just all crusted in and nasty, you know, the way all the smoke has done for 60 years. Hands down, best barbecue. Because you realize places like Franklin's Barbecue in Austin, Texas, they get there at like 7 a.m. to line up, and they don't open until 11. And these people stand in line all morning long to get Franklin's. And it's decent barbecue. I've had some of it, but nothing against them. But my guy, Billy, he kills it in the barbecue game. And I have to, he'll give the credit to the pit as well. It's a 60-year-old pit. It's unreal.
Yeah, that's my next destination for sure. Last question in the lightning round. Would you rather listen to Casey Donahue's music or Kyle Parks?
That's you're going to get me in trouble with both of them.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I love both of them.
Then they can go at it against each other, and this is ammo for either or both.
Exactly.
Of them.
My wife is still, she's a huge Casey fan, and so we get in the car, and so I love Casey. We live in the same town, but I think if I had to pick, I think I'd pick Kyle. I think I would pick Kyle. He's cute. He's lovable. You could pick him up, put him in your pocket. Just a little guy, and he's got that that I'm leaving Stephenville. That's just an earworm. It kind of gets in there. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to go with. But Casey's a little more of a rocker. His music's got a little bit more of a driving deal to it, and his song about the stockyards, I still can't get over how he messed up the streets that. Because he messed it up. If you ever been to the stockyards, everybody who's heard stockyards is my backyard, you know that Casey messed it up. God bless you, Casey. But I'd have to go with Kyle. And plus, my good friend Ben is his fiddle player. So, yeah. Now I'm in trouble.
Well, thanks for throwing gas on the fire for both of them. That's perfect.
They're both doing well for themselves.
Yeah,
so, it doesn't matter what I'm listening to. I support both of those guys.
Well, I love kind of the back and forth between the two of them on Twitter, and I think that it's a great lesson for everybody. And what I mean by that is I think everybody ought to have an arch nemesis. I have an arch nemesis who's an author friend of mine. His name's Cliff Fazzolari, and we're just brutal with each other, relentless, Photoshop, you name it. And But at the end of the day, we root for each other.
Yeah.
You know, I promote his books. He promotes mine, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, it's you got to punch up a little, you know, and have an arch nemesis. So would you say, do you have an arch nemesis in your world?
It's funny that you bring that up. I was thinking about it this morning. I've got a guy who follows my Political Cowboy Facebook page, and the guy is daily trying to stir up a debate, and he caught me in the right mood this morning. His name is, I'm not even going to give his name. He knows who he is. I slaughtered his name. Ansimana Noon is his name. And
Mohamed Sanu, isn't he a wide receiver in the NFL?
Yeah. So this guy wants to debate. So this morning he just caught me in a mood, and I was snarky, and so I just took it to him, man. And I'm like, this guy has been baiting me for a year now to debate it, and I don't mind saying I decimated him. I decimated him. And I was like, there you go, buddy. That's Carthaginian peace right there. I just poured salt on your field so nothing should ever grow again. But you know what? He'll be back tomorrow. Wanting more. They love the punishment.
Yeah,
they love the punishment. And I'm the guy that gives it.
And that's what an arch nemesis is for. So, Chad, I want to thank you for coming on the show. If you haven't gotten out to one of Chad's live shows, you need to do that. You go to watchchad.com. You will find one of his tour stops in a city near you. And if he hasn't gotten to you yet, you can tweet to him and complain that he hasn't been there. Or why aren't you coming to my town? It's not that he's not going there. He just maybe hasn't been there yet. Yeah. But you've traversed the country, and I'm looking forward to catching the show tonight. I'm glad we made time to connect here today. Watchchad.com. And Chad, what is your favorite place to connect with people on social?
Facebook. I love Facebook. Facebook's interesting because it's a little more of a mature crowd that's on there. The kids these days say, we don't go on Facebook because it's only for old people. I love Facebook. The new Watch Chad Prather Facebook watch page is the newest. All my videos are coming up there and going on there. So I appreciate everybody going on and following that. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Watch Chad. I've kind of taken a little bit of a pullback on Twitter here recently, just because I felt like it was getting a little bit toxic in my world, and sometimes I think you have to take a breather, you know what I mean? But Facebook's still the spot.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thanks a bunch.
Thanks for listening to the Coach Bru Show. If you're not currently subscribed to the podcast, sign up now on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And for more information to turn your potential into performance, head on over to coachbru.com now.